I'd like to, for us to look at the concept of spiritual insights. And then maybe we could look at the concept of uncertain times. You know, there is a saying that it's in each and every one of us to be wise. All you have to do is open up your eyes. And when we talk about spiritual insights, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about a way of seeing that comes from the inside of us. In other words, insight is something that I can receive through an aha moment. Insight is something that could be triggered from something intuitive inside of me. Insight could also be seen from making sense and meaning of my experiences. And insight is also something that connects me to a higher purpose in life. So I look for the sense and meaning, not just connected to what's happening on the outside, but I look for sense and meaning in terms of wisdom. And that is why, for me, one of the prayers I take a lot of inspiration from is the serenity prayer. God, give me the wisdom to accept that which I cannot change. So if I cannot change something on the outside, then I need to connect to something that will give me the strength based on wisdom to accept it. And I think the biggest crisis of insight is our ego. The ego that tells me I can fix it. The ego that tells me I can control it. The ego that tells me I can change it. But ego never tells me to accept it, because ego thinks that if I were to accept something, I'm weak. But wisdom tells me to accept that which I cannot change. And that wisdom is based on an insight. And I'll give you the experience of what I'm saying. I'll try to support it with a story. And of course, I'll try to tell you my personal stories. I was going through a period in which my father, who was 89 years old, was in and out of the hospital. Basically, he was transitioning. And you know, where it's your relation with your father, there is this great attachment inside of you, right? The attachment of, I don't want to let go. I can fix it. I can work with the system, and the system can fix it. I can work with the doctors and they can get something. Some insight will touch them and they would miraculously turn things around. So this one time, I'm in the hospital with him and I would stay with him all night. Because why? The ego was telling me to control things, that they won't be able to do anything. And I didn't want them to do anything without him consenting to it. And he mentally was still very lucid. He was still very alert. And so I would be with him. And anything they were doing, I was alert. What are you doing? And then I would consult with him. Do you want them to do this? This is what they're doing. But there came a time when the doctor called us as a family and said, look, basically, we're putting fluid in his body. The body is unable to absorb it, and we have to pull it out again. So how long are we going to do this? You have to make a decision. You could either, we could keep him here and allow for that transition, or you could take him home and allow for the transition. So I then, that night, do what I do best, the peace, the stability, right, that we talk of. And what was the third? Peace, stability, and strength. Peace, stability, and strength. Clarity. Peace, stability, and clarity. They're three important pillars to accept, to get that insight to accept. So I went into my meditation. I wanted clarity. I wanted to be stable. And I wanted to be at peace as well. So what I do in my meditation, I connect to a higher source, to a higher power, to God, because that's the meditation I've learned. So this night, when we heard that, we had an evening meeting with the doctor. So I stayed the night because we had to make a decision. And I was meditating. But I was meditating, thinking of a solution. I was meditating, really looking to see if a solution would emerge from inside of me. And then I got to a point in which all three of these suddenly occurred. The peace brought me to a place of silence. I was no longer thinking. I was very stable. I was stable in the sense I wasn't worried anymore. I was actually very like an observer to my own self. And what I was looking for was clarity. I wanted to be clear because suddenly I realized if I pursue this path of finding fixes and trying to control the situation, I was actually tampering with my father's life. How do I know what he wanted? How do I know what was best for him? How do I know what God wanted for him? I no longer wanted my attachment to stand in the way and my attachment to dictate for me what to do or what to think or what to feel. So I was stable. I was looking for this clarity and I was peaceful and silent. And in that moment of silence and stability and peace, I suddenly heard a very clear voice in my own head. And the voice said, what do you want? Whatever it is you want will happen. What is it you want? No, that for me was inside. And I remember being struck by it. By this time, it was about 2 a.m. And I remember looking at the clock in the nurse's station. And it was 2. And I'm saying, what do I want? And there was like a deep sigh from within me. And I said, I want nothing. And in that moment, I understood what acceptance was. I said I wanted nothing because the clarity was, the insight was, at that moment of uncertainty outside, was do what is best for the soul. Because I don't know what is best for the soul, so I don't want anything. And I realized that was a humbling, of course, from which humility emerged. And there was this acceptance. And the moment I said that, I felt a freedom from my own unconscious biases in relation to that soul, a freedom from my own selfish interest in relation to that soul. And all I wanted was what was best. And so the next morning, I explained it to my dad, what the doctor said, because I wanted transparency. I didn't want to hide anything from him. And I said, what do you want? And he looked at me and he said, I want to go home. And we took him home. And 2 days, I think it took, and he transitioned. And then, I reflected after and I said, what if I had answered that question differently? Would that have been the emergence of an insight that came from stability, that clarity? Would it have come from stability and peace? Or would it have come from a provocation of my ego and my attachment? And of course, you should never say woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? After something has happened, but you accepted it. And I think I had the strength to accept the passing because I was right there, to do everything that was necessary to do. But I think in that moment also, everything happened. I grieved. I did everything. So it was like letting the soul go in its independent way without us holding on to things. And so for me, when I think of insights, those insights wouldn't come just like that. The insights would come if we move into spaces that exist within us that are called reflective spaces and contemplative spaces. Because we live in a world of a lot of noise. And the noise is what, to me, the biggest noise, the biggest crisis that exists in our world today is the crisis of noise. There's a lot of noise out there. And I'm constantly absorbing that noise. How can I be stable and peaceful when the soul is absorbed by noise? The noise is outside, but the noise is also inside of me. And the noise is based on my attachments in my relationships. The noise is based on my ego. The noise is based on things like my desires. So there's so much of noise occurring inside, but they're all connected to the outer reality. So that for me is a story. I wanted to open up this whole thing of what insight is. And I'm sure you all have your stories as well. The second aspect I wanted for us to look at is uncertain times. Do you think time is uncertain, or do you think I am uncertain? We are uncertain, right? Blame it on time, right? We always look for something to blame for our uncertainty. Because I mean, when I think of my forefathers leaving India, going to a country that they'd never heard about, sailing across the 7 seas, wasn't that uncertainty? Big time, right? Looking for a life in a part of the world that wasn't even developed. It's the same thing when the Pilgrims came to the United States. They were looking for their freedom. But what did they encounter when they came here? Did they see the United States of America as they see it today? No. When you came to the United States of America, what brought you here? Was it because the country was uncertain? Was it because the time was uncertain? Or did you see it as a time of opportunity? Opportunity. Okay. So I think this misnomer of time is uncertain, we have to kind of recalibrate. We have to relook at it in a different way, because I don't think time is uncertain, even though we say it, it's a saying. But I think that we collectively have created consequences that are showing up as situations and circumstances that we have to face. So one of the spiritual insights that we have received and we work with very closely is that time is beneficial. Time is auspicious. Time is on your side. But it depends on how you use that time. Depending on how you use the time, the consequences will be accordingly. So if I waste time, what do I expect? All right. If I use time, if I procrastinate and put things off, what do I expect? But if I use time in a worthwhile way, then it would be a very different scenario in my life. So I think that spiritual insight is to align time and thoughts and breath. When I align these three things, I am aligning myself to something that stabilizes me inside, something that puts me in a space of peace. And thirdly, something that makes me see that all three are valuable. They're the three most valuable resources I have. The way I use my time, the way I use my thoughts, the way I use my breath. But yet, how many of these three we take for granted? How much of it we waste? How much of attention we pay to it? Right? I don't think much. However, If I'm pursuing something material in life, if I want something material, if I'm in, as we say, in pursuit of happiness, but I want to take it from the material world, then those three things are very important for me to use to get what I want. But if someone were to say to me, use those same three things and develop the moral compass that lies within us of our conscience, would I spend the same amount of time on it? So spiritual insight in uncertain times, or when we're facing, let's just remove the word time and use situations and circumstances. When faced with uncertainty in my situations and circumstances, the spiritual insight is not just the development of my mind and the development of my ideas, but it's also development of my conscience. Because conscience, as a spiritual insight, is very important for me to discern right from wrong and truth from falsehood, and allow me to move in the direction that I should be moving in while I'm facing my situations and circumstances. And then people ask, what is conscience? And I always answer that conscience is the love that exists in the intellect. In Hindi, there is one word for love that is solely connected to intellect. And the word is preet. And it's called preet buddhi. Buddhi is intellect. You don't say pyar buddhi or sneh buddhi. The beautiful thing about Hindi is each word that they use for love is specific to the expression and the experience of love. So when you use that word preet buddhi, it means in the intellect there is a love. And in that love, which comes from a wisdom, a truth in the intellect, there's justice. And so one of the situations we are facing in the world is a situation of injustices. And the situations of injustices create uncertainty. Another situation we face, whether, we blame it on, we look at our secular world and we blame it on what is happening. Gun violence. What is the reason for gun violence? What is the reason for any kind of violence? It's a form of mental illness. It is something that is occurring in the individual that needs healing. And so how do I heal it? Because, if you go back into the history of every single gun violence, most, not every single one, but most, there were indicators that perhaps something could have happened, but they were ignored. But it comes back to something that is going on in the human being, in the being of the human, that could result in this situation that they could do something violent. But we didn't pick it up and we didn't take an action in time to stop it. And so after to stop, we're cleaning up. We're, trying to clean up. The world is in a cleanup mode. They're trying to clean up something that they could have prevented. And so to me, spiritual insights to deal with crisis is to recognize that let's work with the preventative measures so that we don't have to clean up the things that spill over and make the mess. There was a situation that I'm talking about this because I really deeply contemplated on it. There was a family who visited me in Queens, New York. And as the guy is sitting, he came for lunch. I saw him keep looking at his phone. And I said in my mind, this is how your mind works, right? It's like a devil in your workshop. And the mind is saying, oh, how rude of him. He's come for lunch and he's looking at his phone and I'm talking to him and he's looking at messages. So rather than use my thoughts in a wasteful manner to be thinking what this guy is doing as a disrespect to me, that's my ego, right? He's disrespecting me. He's doing this. I decided to ask him, I said, why are you looking at your text? Is it something that you need to look at and you deal with? And he said, yes. My nephew just disappeared from home. And nobody knows where he is. And his father is contacting me to find out if they should report it to the police. So he said, and I'm talking to them, and we are deciding what to do. Eventually, they did decide, throughout the whole 4 hours he spent with me, throughout the whole 4 hours, they did decide to report it. So now the police is trying to track where this person is. I said, don't worry, because the tendency is to worry. And usually worry is to think the worst. And if we think the worst will happen. It will manifest as the worst. Because if you start thinking and feeling, not just thinking, but feeling, you see, feeling is very powerful. It is even more powerful than thoughts. That something bad has happened to this person, then you're sending those feelings to him and he's picking up those feelings, and then the thoughts will emerge as destructive to himself. So I said to him, let us just go into silence. Let us just be stable, that nothing is going to go wrong with him, even though he's going through whatever he's going through. And let us surround him with peace. And in this silence, let us look for the insights that would emerge. And it will guide us in terms of what to do, or even what to be for him. Now, the person never meditated, isn't interested in meditation, but because of desperation, he says, okay, let's do it. So we sat and we did it. His wife was with him and his 2 kids. And that child was the age of his kids. And his kids are high school. And they are witnessing this. And I'm looking at their faces. And I want to put them in a realm of safety, in a domain of safety, so the kids wouldn't feel anxious. After we've done it, we give out these blessing cards, which you're going to get. I gave it to all of them. And he didn't read his. He just put it in his pocket. And then we ate and they left. When he got home, he texted me. And he said, they found him. And he was with the police. And the police then contacted his parents. And he says, I don't know what happened, but I became very, very calm after sitting in that meditation. But the clarity that came to him in the meditation was that this person was safe. So for me, the insight that emerges, the spiritual insight, If we would just take the time to be still and to be at peace on the inside of ourselves and don't allow the anxiety to overcome us, but it requires practice, then what happens is that it is as if something from a higher power assures us of what to be in that moment for the other. It's not what to think will happen to them. And also not just to feel, this is what I want to happen to them, but to be something for them. So the clarity emerges from you, from the soul's stability, inner stability. Clearly, this is what is going to happen. So when it was my father going into transition, and it requires an acceptance, for this guy with his nephew, the clarity was, he's safe. And I will hold on to that safety for him. Now, how many of us could do that or think of doing that when our near and dear ones, and that's the biggest crisis. And I'm going to stay with this interpersonal thing because, of course, there's a crisis of money, there's crisis of physical health, there's crisis of many other areas of our life. But how many of us could do that for another person we love dearly? And at the moment of the deepest crisis that that person is going through, I can be the opposite for them. So in other words, can I empathize with what is going on with my near and dear ones without drawing the sorrow of the pain they're going through? Can I empathize with my near and dear ones, being for them what they cannot be for themselves? Because that for me is empathy. Empathy is not just feeling what the other is feeling, but empathy is, can I be the opposite for them? Can I be what they want me to be? And they can, what they want to be for themselves, but they cannot be it for themselves. So they're holding on to me to be it for them. And that is why healing is very important. At the time someone is going through a crisis and is in hospital or is at home, and you go to visit that person, if the person is terminal, for instance, and you go to visit that person, even if you open your mouth and say, oh, you'll be fine, don't worry, it's all right, and you try to make them feel better, you think words do it? But if you reach out, take their hand and hold it, and through that healing touch, you transmit from a peaceful inner state the love, the assurance, the safety. Don't you think they will pick it up easier? So this is spiritual insight when we face situations of crisis. So should I stop there and you ask me questions? Because I think that I've thrown some pebbles in your souls, and I'm sure there are lots of ripples going on. And so maybe you want to ask me or be in conversation with me on some of the scenarios that you may be going through and want some more specific insights on. But I would end with one thing. How many of you have read Thomas More's work? You have? Did you read Caring for the Soul? Okay, so Caring for the Soul is a book that he wrote. And he's very thoughtful. And he's saying, he's a little bit like me. That's why I like his work in terms of how he looks at things. So he's saying we pay too much of attention to just the mind, but we need to look at the whole being. We need to look at the soul. And we need to care for the soul as part of our well-being. Because what I just shared with you is not going to happen by magic, even though we do have the potential inside. But to bring the potential, emerge that potential of looking at insights that would help us to look at the situations and circumstances differently as opportunities, as what's hidden, what's the secret hidden behind the curtain of darkness. That needs a practice, and it needs a commitment to the well-being of the soul. And it is not enough when I'm going through a crisis to go to the temple, the synagogue, the church, or my place of worship and pray and expect God to do it all for me. But I have to do it for myself. I have to care for myself. And I have to develop those abilities that will give me the insight that I need to deal with situations, with problematic situations, and having the solutions come from the inside, from deeper insights. And so caring for the soul is very important. And so he's written it. And one of the things he said that is important for caring for the soul is a love for yourself. It's to love yourself. It's to heal yourself. Is to give yourself the time to understand who you are and to know what your strengths are, because your strengths are usually hidden in your vulnerabilities. And so don't treat negative situations and circumstances as your enemies. Treat them as you would see vulnerabilities, because hidden in those are your strengths. And what you're seeing is not the strengths, but you're seeing the darkness, you're seeing the weakness. But if you then detach from it, the situation and circumstances, and say, that's not me, that is the effect of a cause that I may have contributed with. But I'm not even the cause. I am someone different from the cause. And I go back to see, well, I may have taken the wrong direction here, but there must be a strength within me. And let me look for that strength. So I believe in that. I believe that insights come from not denying the situations and circumstances, but not being afraid of the situations and circumstances, but see them as teachers, or see them also as guides that would lead me to my strength. And that is why a situation or a circumstance may be a dark tunnel that I'm moving through. But if I'm moving through this dark tunnel, am I looking for the light at the end of the tunnel? Or am I the light moving through the tunnel of darkness? And if I'm the light moving through this tunnel of darkness, then the light will show me what's in the darkness. And usually darkness is an absence of light. Isn't that what it is? But I will see what I need to heal in myself. And I wouldn't just expect someone else to do it for me, or I wouldn't blame someone else for having done it to me. Because this is spiritual insight. Accept responsibility for the situation you happen to find yourself in, even though it wasn't your fault. It may not have been your fault, but the fact that you found yourself in this, there's a secret there that you must discover because it's your strength. And don't give your strength up to the darkness, right? Discover it as part of your light. And so I'll end with a story. Someone said, there was a conversation between, did you see that moon on the 31st of August? It was called a blue moon, right? And the blue moon is usually very close to the earth, and it is just a huge moon. And I was driving back from New Jersey to New York. Some of you heard the story. And, when you hit the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, for those of you who know New York, you're bumper to bumper traffic. And that happened to me. So I said, you're looking for something. Oh God, it's so boring. You're moving stuff. And I had my GPS on, so I couldn't listen to music or anything. I had to be following this GPS. And then I saw this blue moon, and it was so spectacular against the New York dark sky that I said, okay, this is my guide home. I will follow this moon. So this story is about the moon, the full moon, and a cave. So the cave is looking at the moon and saying, I'm so dark. It's so dark in here. Everything is a crisis. Where there's darkness, there's a crisis. So much is going on here, and all I'm getting is sorrow and bitterness and complain. And so the moon is trying to say to the cave, well, do this, like how when we're doing our spiritual journey, we're getting spiritual wisdom. Do it this way and try it that way. And, accept responsibility for that darkness. Try to change it, etc. And then the cave challenged the moon and said, you don't know what it's like down here. You should come down and see what this darkness is all about, because you really don't know what darkness is. So the moon accepted the challenge, and the full moon came into the cave and lit the whole cave up and said to the cave, so show me the darkness. Where is the darkness? And of course, there was no darkness because the light of the moon lit everything up. So it's the same thing. A crisis is a darkness. We could stay in that crisis and complain from now to doomsday. But let's call on the insight. Insight is light. It's a light that shows me the truth, and the truth liberates me from the fear of something that is holding me in prison, that is trapping me. And that is my illusion. Darkness is an illusion. But when I have the insight, the illusion is removed. And I pick up the pieces, I accept the responsibility, and I live my life on a very elevated learning curve, because life is about learning. And when I learn from my life, I celebrate my life. Celebration isn't an outcome of life. We've forgotten to celebrate life. As I said, life has become a labor. But now we have to celebrate life. And we can only celebrate life when there are these insights that connect us to a higher purpose and give us a reason to learn from the inside out. And so I would leave you with that story, but I would also say this true celebration of life is to learn the treasures within you. That's the highest learning. And no one can do that for you but you. So, Om Shanti, I'll stop here and invite you in conversation.
That's just feeling hopeful. And mind maybe sharing what experience on the way you said, utilize time, thoughts, and breath, you know, you have to best possible thing. I remember I was listening to Gayatri once, who was sharing like 1 second, one thought, one breath. So, you know, if you could maybe share some more light on that, like how do I really, you know, make sure that thoughts like that, breath, you know, how do I line thought?
Yeah. I'm going to be doing a talk on the end of September, and it's on peace. And I chose, this is my topic: 1 thought, 3 words, 5 actions. So, time, thoughts, breath. So can I have 1 thought, for instance? And time, thought, and breath is connected to all 3. They're used all the time, no matter what we're doing. So I'm using time, thoughts, breath to create this thought. Om Shanti. It's a thought. Om Shanti means I am peace. That's a thought. Now, a thought could be cognitive. I create 1 thought. It could be a cognitive, means I just think about it. Or a thought could be experiential. I could take it to the level of feeling it. I'm feeling this peace. The moment I start to feel the peace, my breath changes. The rhythm of my breath, you know, if those of you who have hypertension know this, that breathing helps to relax the blood vessels. That helps with the pressure. So much so that they created a device called Rest. And it connects breathing to the relaxation of your blood vessels, to the lowering of your blood pressure. And it says without any side effects. And doctors are recommending it. Hypertension specialists are recommending it. So that thought, once it goes into the experiential, your breath, it affects your breath. And then the thing about time, there are 2 aspects to look at in time. And one is the clock. The other is time. So I was once in a conference in Geneva, and it was on decent work. And there was the person who was chairing it was from Africa. And he said, I'm chairing this. And those of you from Switzerland, listen up. You have the watch. I have the time. So don't tell me to stick to the clock time, because I have the time. So time is also, you know, what it is. So it's your perception of time. So is time on your side, or are you in bondage to time? I don't have time. I need to get there in time. So you begin to see time differently. So there is that relaxation, isn't there? And so then from that state, create 3 words, which is breath now. You're using your breath to speak. From that state of being, from that 1 thought, what would be the 3 words that would emerge from me? Because words create worlds. Don't underestimate words. They create your world that you live in. You say something to someone, and those words pierced that person, could you ever recall those words? It takes forgiveness is usually words, exchange of words. It's very difficult to forgive someone who said something to you that moved you in a negative way. Very difficult. And so you create three worlds. Now this word Om Shanti, I'll tell you something about it. I went for a walk in India, and I was walking down. It was like a long walk. It was for about an hour. And it was an early morning walk. And myself and another sister, we were coming back. And there was a very indigenous person, dressed with a turban. It was in Rajasthan, and his clothes. And he was standing there and he was looking at us. And then I looked at him, because I like to make eye contact with people. It's part of my spiritual training. So I looked at him and I said, Om Shanti. And he looked at me and he put his hand in his heart and he said, Shukriya, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, sister. And I got a bit, I said, why did he say that? And of course, I went into my contemplation. What happened there in that moment? And I realized up until that time, when I said Om Shanti, it was a greeting. It was like, good morning. And you do, good morning. How are you? And you don't wait to hear an answer because you're too busy, right? So your words don't have any meaning. So that's the world they're creating. So when I thought about it, I realized he took it as a blessing. And so now anytime I say Om Shanti, I no longer say it as a greeting. It's a blessing. I'm blessing myself for being peace. And I'm blessing the other so that they could be peace. So the words that would emerge would create a world of pure feelings and good wishes for myself and for others. Because words create worlds. And then 3 words that would do that. And then 5 actions. Because actions are important. So at the end of the day, today we were at a church, a Catholic church, and their slogan is feeling grateful no matter what. So can I do 5 actions that at the end of my day, when I'm journaling, I can feel grateful for having done those 5 actions? So that is it. That's how you connect these 3 resources. And all it takes is these 3 resources: time, thoughts, and breath. It's the highest currency of life. But how do we use it? We escalate our problems because of the way we think. Our bodies get affected because of the consequences of the escalation of the negative thinking. And our time, we're always running behind time, aren't we? We're like the Swiss with their clocks, not the Africans with their time. Our perception of time has put us in bondage to time. Time is money. So how much time do I spend with my children, and how much time do I spend earning money? And yet I say the money is for them. But by the time I give them the money, they no longer want me. They no longer trust me. They no longer are bonding with me. So that's what it means.
And this happened like late.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, that's a very nice question because for the fear to leave you, you have to transform the fear. So the situation's changed, and you appreciated the change in the situation. But all the experiences that you accumulated from that situation went and settled in your subconscious. They're lying there in your subconscious, waiting to be triggered by a similar situation. So as soon as a similar situation comes, you're triggered. It triggers what's lying in your subconscious. Like memories, the memories are there in your subconscious. And so they're triggered by situations and circumstances, right? You're with me up to this point. So now, yeah, it doesn't matter, but you just need to get, you are in a part, you're at a party, you're having a good time, right? Something from the past just flickers through that party. Whether it's a smell, whether it's something someone said or something, and it will trigger that fear, that uncertainty. And so meditation, part of meditation is a transformation of your subconscious, of what's lying in your subconscious. And that's the way to get rid of it. So it's a purification process, or you could call it a cleansing process, a detox process. So we're detoxing the soul through the meditation, and there's a method to do that. Now we do it through Raj Yoga. Others would do it with other types of yoga or with prayer. And that's why people go into silent retreats, Zen Buddhism, Upasana. These are all, why do they go into these long periods of silence? It's so that they cleanse out the subconscious as much as possible. And, you know, it's very interesting because Bruce Lipton, I don't know, some of you may know him, he did a research on the DNA. And what he is saying, that there's nothing like genetic, tendencies. For those of you who are doctors might know this. He's saying it's not genetic. So if my father had a heart, and my uncles and everyone had a heart problem, they would start looking at me genetically in that way. And so my genes, and so they would start saying, come every year for this, come every year for that. As soon as your cholesterol lies, they put you on statins and things like that. But what he's saying is that it may be so, but it's what's lying in your subconscious that triggers it. Because you're telling yourself that you have the fear that you will end up with that same disease, because you carry those in your subconscious. And it's the fear sometimes that activates it in the body, and most times, I suppose. So the meditation, he also supports meditation, is that use a method that would transform that consciousness. So for us, the transformation of consciousness is what we do in our meditations. And the transformation of consciousness is to move out of the limitations of the body and the material world, and to go into the understanding and experience of the soul, which is a spiritual world. And that will help to remove those tendencies and memories and triggers that we're carrying in our subconscious. Because there are two aspects of the subconscious. One is what I acquired, and the other is what's authentic and true. And so I need to return to the authentic and true, and I need to remove the acquired. So it's a transformation of consciousness. And so one of the practices we do for that is consider yourself to be a soul, seated in the center of the forehead, and the body is your vehicle. The body does not decide what it does. The soul decides what the body does. So with that, you have transformed the consciousness. So if I'm not supposed to have sugar, and the body is craving the sugar, what is the responsibility of the soul? To make the right choices for the body. And so that's the transformation of consciousness we keep doing. So if I take control over my acquired intrinsic qualities that are in my subconscious, then they would be removed. But I have to do it in the right consciousness. I have to do it with the right awareness that I'm responsible for the actions I'm taking. I'm doing through the body. The body isn't responsible for it. I'm responsible for it. And so I must be aware of that. So that's what we do in our practice. So I agree. And freedom from fear is one of the fundamental freedoms. And we have to pay attention to it. It's a gradual process. It is not something that I would do once, but it keeps seeping out. Because the fear that we carry, the biggest fear that we carry is the fear of death. And I usually would say, oh, I'm not afraid of death for myself. But we definitely are afraid of death for people we love. But really what I'm saying, I am afraid of death, whether I want it for myself or not. So if that's the deepest fear we carry, then we have to remove it through stop living in mortality and begin to live in immortality. So I'm an immortal soul in a mortal body, but I'm immortal. And I'm going to do things with this consciousness through my body. So, this is what I'm saying. We have to connect to a higher purpose of life. And we don't want to take that leap. It's a leap of faith. It's very comfortable to live in a material paradigm because we have become accustomed to it. It's a comfort zone. But now we have to do that leap of faith and live as a soul in the body if we are going to reverse what we have done in that body consciousness. To look at another and to discriminate against them because of gender, because of religion, because of culture, because of language, is a big time fear we're expressing. Discrimination comes from fear. Violation of people's rights come from fear. Ego comes from fear. So go through the list of body conscious habits that we have accumulated. It's all competition comes from fear. So, I could reel them off, but the root is fear. But one of the biggest fear is, I know what I need to do. I know what is right, but I'm afraid to do it. That's conscience fear. How many times we know what is right, but we don't do what is right because we're afraid? Society, the government, my position. And so I compromise. I sell my soul because I'm afraid to do what is right. So fear is a big thing here. I sell my soul because I'm afraid to tell the truth. Any more? You want to hear more about fear? Yes. Simran. Yeah, but the insight that I got was I was violating, I was tampering with his part then. I was tampering with his story, right? His story was his story. My story was my story. But I had no right when he was that vulnerable to impose my story on him. So it was a divine insight that occurred that this is misuse of father-daughter relationship here. He has his own story. And if his story was about to end, I can't continue it. And if I did, would I be able to face the consequences of it? And I don't think so. I don't think I had the power to, to reverse the story or to do whatever I want. But it was that deep insight that there's only so much you could travel with someone. And then there comes a point in which your traveling with them stops. You have to get off, he has to get off the train then. And if it's his stop, it's his stop. Am I going to pull the alarm signal before that stop so that he doesn't get off at that stop? Because I know it's that stop that would take him away from me. So these are the divine insights about life, about death, about people's story, about people's part, about stop tampering with it in the name of love when it is an attachment you're actually dealing with. And so it's a lot of these things that emerge that we have to face. And usually it's at these times of great vulnerability. This is why I'm saying don't dismiss these situations as crisis, because they're actually opportunities for us to face things we would never be able to face. So don't create them. Don't call them enemies. Don't make them an enemy. Don't reject them as it's unfair for me to be facing this, or what have I done? I don't like when I'm facing a situation for someone to tell me I'm settling a karmic account. Well, what right have you got to tell me I'm settling a karmic account? To me, that's my ego, right? But I don't like for people to draw that conclusion. Okay, it may be I'm settling here, but isn't it also an opportunity for me to create? Am I going to be doomed by my past when I have a present to create a future? So this is how I see it. I see crisis as an opportunity to create something new. But if I see it as an enemy and I see it as something that is bad, that's my judgment call. And my judgment call is making me a victim of the situation. So, insight is to see things differently, perception. You're all looking at me very intensely. Mhm. Now, one of the spiritual insights is courage. Right? Courage gives spiritual insights, right? Courage is also a virtue that is connected to the heart. The word courage comes from heart. So I'm in a situation, this is a typical one, in which I'm having problems with my significant other. Right? The husband and wife are having problems. I could give you a very specific one. There was a situation in which a wife used to come to the center, and her husband, she was having problems with him. Really big time problems from her side. Now she would come and tell us the story from her side. And we would say to her, look, we can't make that decision for you. You're going to have to make that decision for yourself. You have to decide whether you want to stay in that situation or whether you want to remove yourself from the situation. But you cannot just, she had a daughter, you just cannot make that decision based on you and your husband relationship, because now you have a daughter, right? So it is you and your husband relationship and your daughter. So she would be part of that decision. So whatever you want to do, life will support you, but do not do it as a reaction to your husband. Don't just react because of the way he's treating you or the way he's talking to you and all of that. Take it into what I'm calling into your stability. Be stable first and be peaceful, and then clarity will come. If you see yourself as a wife to that man, you will never, ever be able to be clear of what your decision is. So part of a spiritual insight is, who am I outside of this relationship, of this role I'm playing as a wife to this husband? Do I know myself? Do I know my strengths? Do I exist outside of this relationship in my own eyes? How do I see myself? So first of all, you have to remove yourself from the subserviency and the codependencies that you have this person had fallen into to get the clarity. So she had to do that inner work before. Eventually, she did the work, she did all of that, and she said, I've decided to do this. Right? But here's courage. What she did was that she took the courage to that point to say that this is what she wanted after going through all of this. But then she ran away without telling him this was a decision she took. The husband came looking for her, and he came to the center. And he told us his side of the story. And then I said, every story has two sides. And it all sounded as though, my gosh, this is something incredible. If she would have done this, took a decision and ran away without telling him. So, of course, we had to support him as well. Support her, support him, support the daughter, all three. And then she came back a few days after, because he was like crazy, not just for her, but for his daughter too, because she took the daughter. So I knew where she was. So I called her and I said, you come right back. You have to complete the circle. You can't break the circle and then do something like this. How is your daughter going to trust you? How are you going to trust yourself? What are you running away from if the decision was a clear one? And so she then came back and she had to complete that circle. because she did have to talk to him. They did have to come to conclusions. They were going to separate. The daughter had to be healed in it or to accept it. All the legal aspects had to be taken care of. But I said, don't see him as an enemy. And I said to him, don't see her as an enemy, because you all share history here. You share a daughter. And even if you are going to be separated, which is your choice, do it with courage. Do it with that love that courage gives us. At least be cordial if you can't be friends for your daughter's sake. Because she's still going to have to be nurtured by both of you. Now, he was open to it as well. They went their separate ways. But I think this is how we have to do it. You never stay in a situation that you're going to be abused. I don't encourage that with anyone. But I can't know, but a spiritual guy, somebody helping you cannot make that decision for you. The person has to make the decision for themselves. But the only way they could make that decision for themselves is if they remove themselves as an appendage to that relationship. They have to see themselves as different from the relationship. I am who I am in my own right. And I have to make my decisions from that. But I also have to look at the whole landscape of the decision. And spiritual insights help you to do that a lot. So we always say, take that one step of courage. And the one step of courage is see yourself outside of relationships. See yourself as a single individual in your own right. And then look back at relationships. So is that practical a story? You said you wanted a practical story, so I told you this. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, she had the strength to leave, right? So that was part of the strength, but she didn't have the strength to face her husband and tell him she was leaving. So there was still vulnerability there because she was running away from something. But the vulnerability, because she was doing work on herself, brought her back to her strength to face the situation and to do it with respect for herself, because she was still disrespecting herself to do that. He wasn't abusive. He wouldn't have beaten her up or something like that. They just had a conflict of interest. Now, if he was abusive when she ran away, that was a different scenario. So each case has to be looked at in its own right. And none will clone the other. One case, you can't clone one case with the other case, right? So every person's life story is individual to them as souls, as human beings, and to their stories coming together, but also to their interactions. And so that respect has to be given. So not because I was someone who was in a similar situation, they will say, do it like this. No, you have to do the work in order to do it in your way that will make sense to you, because your situation is very different. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, but the law of karma is a very deep law of life. So every action I do, of course, has a consequence to it. What goes around comes around. As I sow, so I will reap. Now, it depends on the person. I I'm a person that is very hard for me to feel guilty. Very, very hard for me to feel guilty. I don't have that feeling inside of me of guilt. I have it of fear, but I don't have it of guilt. And so I would know that, you know what, I'm getting this lower back pain that is excruciating because I may have I have to settle a karmic account here with my body. I may have done something with the body, but I never go there. What I would say is that how can I treat my body in the right way now, help it heal, so I don't mistreat it, so it serves me well, right? So that means I am not repenting for something I've done in the past, but I'm using my time, thoughts, and breath to create something new with the body, a new relationship with the body. So the settlement of karmic accounts are things I did in ignorance, and I cannot change it. My ignorance led me here. So I don't see myself as a bad person for having done something bad. I see it more as my ignorance. Just as how I don't judge these young people who do bad things and say they're bad people. I sort of say there's a negligence. We didn't take care of our young people the way we should have taken care of them, right? That's like my compassion for them. So I have that, I kind of apply that same compassion to myself. But I also, in order to change direction of my relationship with my body, I create new sets of karma, starting from my awareness to my attitude, to my vision of my body, to the actions I will take in relation to it. And so I say, I could eat, it's a choice. I could either look back and say, oh gosh, I did something bad. Or I could stay in the present and say, here is an opportunity for me to do something good. And I don't need to know what I did bad because it was my ignorance. Now I have divine insight. Now I have insight. I have wisdom. Let me use it. Otherwise, I could choose to put that aside and repent. I don't want to repent, even though I knew I'm accepting the responsibility. I did something that wasn't good. But the way to correct it is to be in the present and to change the direction, to do something different. Because it's all about relationships. It's about relationships with people. It's about relationship with my body. It's about relationship with myself. It's about relationship. The dynamic here is relationship. So it's one, you know the law, but you don't become subservient to the law. You're a master of the law. You know, I always say, we are the law makers and we are the law breakers. So, right? So, and they say, he who makes the law breaks the law. So maybe the law of karma, we collectively made it, right? And we collectively broke it. And so we can't stay with the broken. We have to do something to remake it. Okay, we're after 6 now. Are you all content? Are you all full? Yes. Would you like to do some meditation? Time is eternal. There's a past. There's a present. And there's a future. Time is connected to the circle of life. I, the soul, I am life. I'm living. I'm conscient. I'm the being in the body. And every moment is a moment that gives me the opportunity to express my life. When I'm in the consciousness of being a soul, this consciousness emerges in me an awareness, a spiritual awareness. The awareness of who I am. I am peace. I feel the strength of peace in my being. This strength makes me stable. And this stability gives me clarity. Peace is original to my nature. when I'm aware of my inner peace, I'm aware that my nature is one of nonviolence. I, the soul, I'm aware of a changing outer world. I'm aware that each day brings a new reality of situations and of circumstances. The stability of my inner peace tells me that the situations and circumstances are not me. They come and they go. The spiritual insight that comes from my inner peace prevents me, protects me from holding on to worry and to anxiety caused by my outer situations and circumstance. Let me see the lessons that they offer. Let me see the opportunities that they bring. And let me stay beyond blame, guilt, and fear. Let me align my thought to my breath and my breath to time. And let me draw strength from this alignment. Strength comes when I, the soul, recognize my own potential and when I recognize that my potential comes alive when I'm connected to the source, to the higher power, to God. I'm not afraid to be who I am in the eyes of God. I'm not afraid to be who I am in the eyes of my fellow human beings. And I'm not afraid to be who I am to myself. Om Shanti.